in of itself, the Federal Reserve has been such a mainstay in American public life, especially political life, that we all just kind of take it for granted that it's the Federal Reserve, what are you going to do? And what it does has kind of just slipped under the radar. Everyone's been kind of made numb to exactly what the Federal Reserve does. Before we get too hot and heavy into the video, I do just want to say, if you've been liking my videos for a while, you share them, you comment on them, you enjoy watching them, please do subscribe, ring the bell, all that kind of stuff. We are very close to 1,000 subscribers, and it really mean a lot to me and the kind of to the channel more broadly, to the message, to the movement, if we're able to get 1,000, if even by the end of the year or somewhat. But 1,000 is always kind of like that first milestone goal. And so like I said, if you do enjoy my videos and you share them with your friends and family, all that kind of stuff, subscriptions do really mean a lot to the kind of momentum and to the health of the channel. So if you wouldn't mind hitting subscribe. With that said, let's get into the video. On this channel, I typically talk a lot about social issues, sometimes economic and whatnot, but immigration, got world trade, got everything like that, abortion. But one issue in politics that is uniquely influential, consequential to our everyday lives that no one really talks about, not even less understands, is the Federal Reserve, and is inflation and all that kind of stuff. Inflation, of course, affects us in our day-to-day lives. How much things cost is inflation, the value of the US dollar and whatnot. And the ability to kind of control the currencies and trying to see how much money is in circulation and whatnot is very important in terms of managing the economy and whatnot. And the chief operator of that is, in some way, Congress. They vote on the budgets and they pass deficits and they add to the debt. But at the end of the day, the real enabler, the person or the organization or the movement or the act that enables Congress is the Federal Reserve.
The man that controls the stock market. Good afternoon.
And for those who are unfamiliar with what the Federal Reserve is, it was instituted as part of the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 as an instrument of the U.S. government. It considers itself an independent central bank because its monetary policy decisions do not have to be approved by the president or anybody else in the executive or legislative branches of government. It does not receive funding appropriated by Congress, and the terms of the members of the Board of Governors span multiple presidential and congressional terms. When established, the Federal Reserve was given three main key objectives. Number one was maximizing employment. Number two was stabilizing prices. Number three was moderating long-term interest rates. Now, in of itself, the Federal Reserve has been such a mainstay in American public life, especially political life, that we all just kind of take it for granted that it's the Federal Reserve, what are you going to do? And what it does has kind of just slipped under the radar. Everyone's been kind of made numb to exactly what the Federal Reserve does.
There is no other power greater than the power over money, the power to create and contract the money supply, the power to control the purchasing power of your money. Throughout history, this has proven to be the most sought-after monopolistic power of man. And it has become more sophisticated over the decades and over the centuries, more sophisticated now and more international in scope than ever before.
Which is very interesting to me, especially for Republicans, because take Kamala Harris's campaign, for example, when she went against price gouging and all the kind of price controls that she would have instituted. Republicans rightly criticized her for the communist socialist price controls that she was planning on instituting. I mean, Jimmy Carter put price controls on gas in the 70s, and Nixon did plenty of them himself after going off of the gold standard. But for some reason, when it comes to interest rates and the price of lending, conservatives and Republicans, their brains kind of turn off. They don't really take into account or realize that the Federal Reserve is nothing more or nothing less than price controls on the price of lending. When the Federal Reserve changed its rates, that is the rate in which it lends to all of the other big banks. The whole point of the Federal Reserve is to be the lender of last resort, is what it calls itself. And it is supposed to be the institution that gives banks money when other banks don't. This is what happens to prevent the run, which is what happened in 1907, which prompted the creation of the Federal Reserve in the first place. For some reason, though, this price control has slipped under the radar of conservatives and Republicans seemingly forever. The idea of ending the Fed has always been a pie in the sky conspiracy, a far, kooky libertarian idea. Well, maybe 20 years ago it might have been. Maybe 30 years ago it might have been. Maybe 15 years even it may have been. But to my generation, and to everyone who has lived past the pandemic, who has seen the prices of everyday goods turn into something unrecognizable to what it once was, is a tragedy, and it really is a crime. If you think about when things were just 10 years ago, just 2015, how much things were compared to what they were today, it's unbelievable, the difference. Figure 1, bring it up, goes over the dollar's worth since the creation of the Federal Reserve. This is criminal. This is a sapping of 96% of the purchasing power of the US dollar in a little over 100 years. All the way from 1913, when you implement the Federal Reserve Act, to when FDR criminalizes the possession of gold, later undone by Gerald Ford, to the Bretton Woods Agreement establishing the gold standard and the US dollar as a world's reserve currency. But look at the bottom screen there. 1913, what $1 could buy 30 Hershey's candy chocolate bars. 1933, $1 could buy 10 bottles of beer. 1964, $1 could buy you 1 drive-in movie ticket. 1997, $1 could buy you 4 grapefruits. In 2020, $1 can buy you 1 McDonald's coffee. Now that's 2020. Look at just above that. In 2020 alone, the U.S. money supply grew by $3.8 trillion, which was equal to 20% of all dollars ever created. Just like that. Now, is this the fault of a multitude of presidents? President Trump, President Biden, adding to the deficit very recklessly with stimulus checks and whatnot, bailouts and forgivenesses of student loans? Sure. 100%. This video is not to take accountability away from Congress or any administration in particular. FDR was bad in implementing or criminalizing the possession of gold. Nixon was wrong for taking us off the gold standard. I'll criticize all administrations. But what the point is that Trump, Biden, FDR, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Reagan, Carter, the reason why they were able to run up deficits is because of the fact that they know that the Federal Reserve is there to print money.
To the person who is about to grab their car keys and go to the ATM and take out $3,000, you say what?
You don't need to. Your ATM is safe, your banks are safe, there's enough cash in the financial system, and there is an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve. We will do whatever we need to do to make sure that there's enough cash in the banking system.
The Federal Reserve is what makes the US dollar from a stable currency backed by gold, tethered to gold, to a fiat currency that is only given a value because of our ability to restrain the amount of it in circulation. There's no hard restraint anymore on Congress to regulate themselves and to prevent new monies from being created. Back when we were under the gold standard, it was very difficult, damn near impossible, to inflate the currency because you had to have gold to issue those notes. Now, you can literally just print dollar bills and there's nothing to back it up. There's nothing that you can take a $1 bill to the US government, to the state, and say, hey, I have a $1 bill here. Can I exchange this for something? No, that doesn't exist anymore. The Federal Reserve is what allows Congress to write endless checks they do not have to cash.
The Federal Reserve pays both foreign and domestic banks to simply park their money in Fed accounts. In other words, to not loan money at all. Over the past 5 years, the Fed's big bank bailout amounts to over $500 billion. This bailout causes the Fed to operate at a loss, which means that the Fed cannot remit profits to the taxpayer as it normally does. According to the economist Judy Shelton, if these payments stopped, banks would buy Treasury securities and it would bring interest rates down. Some people say that this program is a floor to interest rates.
Living comfortably then and now at the cost of the future. Look at this graph again. That is 96% of the US dollar's value gone. This has gotten even worse. We're 2025 now. Just pre-COVID. Prices pre and post-COVID are two completely different universes, let alone worlds or galaxies. It's stolen the future of this country, generations of this country. Affordability is almost a lost cause at this point. And it goes back to what the Fed tries to do. See, the Fed tries to adjust interest rates to cool the economy and to make sure inflation doesn't get too bad. The problem with the Fed, though, is that they are inherently a reactive organization, an independent organization, like anybody actually believes that. The Federal Reserve is inherently reactive in nature because it's trying to follow the puck of where it's going. They can't be proactive or else they'd risk damaging the economy. They had to see where the puck is going before they could make a decision. And they had to arbitrarily adjust the rates to chase this goal of some reason, 2% inflation every year. For some reason, that's the number.
Certainly my view, to dismantle the scope creep of the U.S. Federal Reserve itself by limiting its mandate to dollar stability, period, instead of trying to centrally manage inflation and unemployment as some sort of centralized god. It's like the equivalent of a drunken bar patron trying to throw darts, hitting two different targets at the same time with one dart badly missing on both. That's what our Federal Reserve has been doing to the detriment of American workers because they have viewed wage growth as a leading indicator of inflation, when in fact anybody who's ever been in the business world knows that wages are the last thing to go up in an economic cycle, which means they tighten monetary policy right into a downturn of the economic cycle, which gives us booms, busts, and then what do you know, bailouts in the end, and having a side debate about whether or not we should recoup bank payments when in fact what we need to be doing is put the Federal Reserve in its place.
We're told it's because it promotes a healthy economy. I don't think our economies are healthy at all. Most of the time, under Trump's first administration, the interest rates were zero. And then they had to get spiked up during Joe Biden's administration. And now they're still relatively high. And the reality is that the Federal Reserve, as it takes its job seriously, the current rates should stay high. Because while the rate of the inflation from COVID has slowed, we still had to get back down. We had to come back down this way. From the increase we had to come back down. We're very far away from that. The only real hope that we have regarding this is that the inflation stays at the same rate. They're not going to jack the rates up any higher than they already are. But we have to keep the currency at this relatively stable point until we can grow the economy to match up. We have this supply of money. And it's not like we're going to shrink it like we should and what we need to do. But because inflation inherently is too much money chasing too few goods, what we need to do is we need to keep the supply of the money what it is. We can't keep on expanding it. And we need to grow the economy to produce the goods in order to catch up with prices. That's what we need to do. But the problem with the Federal Reserve is that nobody has the fiscal discipline to do so. That's where the gold standard kicks in. If we return to gold, it would force Congress to do so because it cannot issue banknotes to gold it cannot fulfill. Ever wonder why the price of gold has skyrocketed? Year to date, last time I checked, it was up 50%. Year to date. It's because as this currency, as the US dollar, depreciates in value, the ultimate store of value, gold, skyrockets. And don't act like the Feds care about that. The Federal Reserve cares about that. Jerome Powell cares about the price of gold. Because all central banks know, in reality, that if gold is doing good, they are doing bad. And the more debt that is carried on into this country, courtesy of the enabling Federal Reserve, the more the price of gold will skyrocket, the more the price of cryptocurrencies will skyrocket, as people chase alternatives to a depreciating store of value. Because more and more every single day, not as if we were going to in the first place before, but the chances that the likelihood of the U.S. government actually paying down its debt is non-existent. It's not going to happen. And so in order to counteract that, people look elsewhere because the US dollar has no inherent value anymore. It's lost 96% of it since the Federal Reserve was created. So what's the next step forward? Well, it's very simple. A man not too long ago once ran for president touting the phrase, "end the Fed." Well, rather, he didn't coin it, but the young people who were rallying around his campaign did so. They chanted, "end the Fed" at his rallies, at his speeches, and they're right. If we ever hope to reclaim the fiscal sanity for the health of this country, to make housing affordable again, to make prices stable again, to have the growth that we had in the late 19th and early 20th century, we need to end the Fed. We need to end the Fed. We need to return to gold. Like I said, I am not cherry picking any particular administration. Trump was wrong with the amount of stimulus that he gave out. We dumped so much money into the economy because of the pandemic that it may have terminally poured an entire gallon of gasoline on an already raging fire. The inflation from the pandemic has been absolutely brutal. Some would say fatal. I think it's fatal. I didn't think that the government was going to pay off its debt before, and I certainly don't think it's going to happen now. We're too addicted to spending money we do not have. And we need a structural barrier that prevents us from doing so. We cannot be trusted to do it ourselves. We're too busy spending more than we're willing to take in. And there's only one silver bullet that will be able to solve that. End the Fed. Bring us back to gold. Restore fiscal sanity, fiscal stability. Let the price of lending be dictated by the free market instead of bureaucrats who arbitrarily set the interest rates that all of us have to suffer under. That all the banks have to watch the Federal Reserve for what they're going to do as they try and pin the value of fiat currency. It's lost 96% of its value. I didn't really talk much about the US dollar being a world reserve currency, as that was a kind of move post-World War II to ensure that everyone would be tied together with world trade to prevent further conflicts. The problem is that when you're the world reserve currency, first of all, that gives the United States absurd leverage in international affairs. Rightly so. If you're an empire, that's what you want. That's exactly what America was post-World War II, an American empire. But when you're the world reserve currency, you are the guy. You have to be the definition of stable. You have to be the guy that everyone is able to lean on for value. You cannot be a force that changes, that is unreliable. That's what we became when we became the world reserve currency, though. We told everyone, hey, rely on the US dollar. Then we prompted to go spend billions of dollars, trillions, including Afghanistan, dollars, playing around in the sandbox in the Middle East. And taking up the gold standard because we realized that the gold standard was this one thing that was still kind of keeping us on the rails. It was too restrictive. We could not adequately borrow enough to keep our economy going, or else we risked falling behind potentially. So we got rid of it. And so now world powers are already talking about creating another world reserve currency. Countries are already starting to denounce the United States as a world reserve currency, not trusting the United States dollar. If the United States was still on the gold standard, though, this wouldn't be an issue. If the Federal Reserve was ended today, it wouldn't be an issue. I have large resentment towards the Federal Reserve. Large resentment. And like I said, this is not to bring accountability away from Congress administrations. I don't like high spending Congresses either. They are weak. They are unprincipled. They fail. They are failures. inherently, definitionally, they are failures. But the Federal Reserve is what gives Congress the superpower to print. Without the Federal Reserve, Congress cannot do that. They cannot just print money, because that's the Federal Reserve. That is a prime function. They are the central bank. They are the ones who fund the banks across this country. They are the lender of last resort. They are the ones who add money into the economy. If you shut that down, you turn off that faucet, and then you tell people this bill is worth some amounts of gold. That puts value back in the US dollar. That will deflate the currency, which is what we need to happen, because the inflation is out of control. We need to deflate the dollar, regain control of our own currency, and then and only then can we begin to prosper once again. But it's all for naught unless we end the Fed. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button. If you want to support our channel grow, become a member, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay updated on my uploads. Finally, whether you agree or disagree, leave your thoughts in the comments section below. I look forward to engaging with you guys in respectful and thoughtful discussions. With that said, I'll see you guys next video. See ya.